Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a figure whose death story is almost more famous than his life. It's this incredibly dramatic legend.
Absolutely. Grigori Rasputin. And when you hear that name, you instantly picture, well, that Boney M song, right? The mad monk who just wouldn't die.
Exactly. Poisoned, shot multiple times, beaten, drowned, the whole 9 yards. But that story, the one everyone knows, it mostly comes from the guy who killed him, Prince Felix Yusupov.
And that's where it gets interesting, because we have Yusupov's dramatic memoir on one hand, and then we have the forensic evidence from the actual autopsy on the other. Cold, hard science.
So that's our mission today. We're taking the sources Yusupov's account, historical context, and especially Dr. Kosatov's 1917 autopsy report, and we're going to try and figure out what really went down in that basement at the Moika Palace.
Separating the killer's narrative, which became this huge legend, from what the science tells us.
Before we dive into the murder itself, we need to set the stage. Who is this guy, Grigori Rasputin?
Well, he started life in 1869 as Grigori Efimovich Novik. The name Rasputin came later, and it kind of means dissolute or debauched, which tells you something. He was born in a small Siberian village, Pokrovskoye.
Just a peasant?
Yep, a peasant family. No formal education, couldn't read or write until he was an adult. Really, a world away from the imperial court in St. Petersburg.
So how does someone like that end up advising the Tsar and Tsarina?
It's quite a journey. First, he had a fairly normal early life. He married a local woman, Praskovia Dubrovina, back in 1887. They had 7 children, though sadly only 3 survived infancy: Dmitri, Maria, and Varvara.
A family man, then. What changed?
Around 1897, when he was about 28, something shifted dramatically. He had this intense religious experience, supposedly after visiting the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkhoturye.
And he just left his old life.
Pretty much. He walked away from his family, his farm, everything. He became what's known in Russia as a stranik.
A stranik, what's that?
It means a holy wanderer, a pilgrim. These were people, often peasants, who felt called to travel constantly, relying on charity, offering spiritual advice. They were a recognized part of Russian Orthodox culture.
So he wasn't just aimlessly wandering.
No, it was a spiritual path. He spent months, maybe years on the road. Some accounts say he traveled huge distances, perhaps even as far as Mount Athos in Greece, which is a major center of Orthodox monasticism. This was around 1900.
And this wandering life, this is where he developed his charisma, his reputation.
Exactly. Living rough, meeting all sorts of people, developing this intense spiritual persona. By 1904, 1905, he started gaining a reputation in places like Kazan as a starets.
A starets, like a holy elder.
Sort of. It's a spiritual guide, someone whose wisdom comes from experience and closeness to God, not necessarily from books or the official church hierarchy. Rasputin, with his rough looks, his piercing eyes, his peasant background, he seemed authentic, powerful.
And this is what caught the eye of people in St. Petersburg.
Yes, but he needed patrons. He was helped by figures like Archimandrite Theophan, a respected churchman, and quite famously by the Black Princesses.
The Black Princesses. Sounds intriguing.
They were Princess Militsa and Princess Anastasia of Montenegro, married into the Russian Grand Ducal family. They were obsessed with mysticism, the occult, spiritualism, all that sort of thing. They were always looking for the next big spiritual figure.
And Rasputin fit the bill.
Perfectly. You have to understand the atmosphere in St. Petersburg society then. Sources describe it as bored, cynical, and seeking new experiences. They'd already had a few foreign mystics pass through.
So Rasputin was different.
Yeah, he was Russian, he was earthy, he seemed genuinely devout in a raw, peasant way. He was this exotic figure from the depths of Siberia, not some polished European charlatan. That made him incredibly appealing to this jaded aristocracy.
But the controversy started almost immediately, didn't it? The rumors.
Oh, absolutely. Almost as soon as he arrived, whispers started about him having, inappropriate relations with his female followers. And then the really damaging rumors surfaced that he was involved with the Kleisty sect.
The Kleisty, what were they known for?
They were a sort of underground religious group, pretty controversial. Their name might mean something like whips or people of God. They practiced these ecstatic rituals called radenia, dancing, chanting, prophesying.
And the rumors included
Orgies, that their ecstatic states sometimes led to group sex. Now, linking Rasputin, this supposed holy man, to a sect known for heresy and sexual abandon, That was explosive.
Did anyone investigate this? Was there any truth to it?
Well, that's the interesting part. The Tsar's secret police, the Okhrana, they actually did investigate him several times, specifically looking for ski connections. They found nothing concrete. The official reports, which we have access to in the source material, state there was no proof he was ever a member. Maybe he copied some of their practices, maybe it was just slander, but the mud stuck.
So the mad monk image was already forming, even before he got close to the Tsar.
Definitely. The label was there early on, but none of this might have mattered long term if he hadn't made the one connection that made him untouchable.
The imperial family.
Precisely. He met Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra Feodorovna in November 1905. But the key, the absolute linchpin, was their son, the Tsarevich Alexei.
The heir to the throne.
Yes.
And he suffered from hemophilia.
Yes, the royal disease. A devastating genetic condition passed down through Queen Victoria's line. Alexander carried the gene. It meant Alexei's blood didn't clot properly.
So any minor bump or bruise could be life-threatening.
Exactly. Terrible internal bleeding, especially into the joints. Extremely painful. Crippling. And the doctors at the time, they could do very little. They basically just had to wait and hope the bleeding stopped.
And Alexandra was desperate.
Utterly desperate. Sources describe her as having a passionate attachment to Rasputin because she became convinced he was the only one who could help her son. She saw him as God's answer to her prayers.
This brings us to that famous incident in 1912, right?
Yeah.
At Spaja.
Yes, the hunting lodge in Poland. Alexei had a fall, or maybe just a jolt in a carriage ride, and developed a massive internal hemorrhage in his thigh and groin area. It was incredibly serious.
How bad was it?
He was delirious with pain and fever. The doctors were giving him up for dead. They'd administered the last rites. The whole imperial court was in despair.
And Alexandra turned to Rasputin.
Who was back in Siberia at the time. She sent him frantic telegrams begging him to pray for Alexei.
And his reply?
It was incredibly confident, almost arrogant. He wired back, "The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much."
Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much. What happened then?
Almost immediately after receiving the telegram and presumably following Rasputin's instruction, Alexei started to improve. The bleeding slowed, the fever broke. He recovered.
For Alexandra, this must have been absolute proof. A miracle.
Undeniably. Even one of the attending physicians, Dr. Fedorov, later admitted the recovery was wholly inexplicable from a medical point of view. This cemented Rasputin's position. He wasn't just the spiritual advisor anymore. He was seen as essential for the survival of the heir and thus the dynasty.
Was it really a miracle? Or is there another explanation in the sources?
This is where we get that fascinating scientific insight looking back with modern knowledge. Think about Rasputin's instruction. Do not allow the doctors to bother him. What were the doctors likely doing?
Well, trying to manage the pain, presumably.
Exactly. And what was the go-to pain relief medication at the time? Widely available, used for almost everything.
Aspirin.
Aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid. And what do we know about aspirin now that they didn't fully grasp then, especially regarding bleeding disorders?
It thins the blood. It's an anticoagulant.
Precisely. So, here's the Tsarevich, suffering from a massive internal bleed because his blood doesn't clot properly, and the doctors, trying to ease his agony, are likely giving him aspirin, the very substance preventing any natural clotting from occurring.
Oh my God. So Rasputin, by telling Alexandra to keep the doctors away,
he inadvertently stopped the administration of the anti-clotting drug. He removed the very thing that was worsening the condition. By stopping the bothering, he allowed Alexei's own, albeit impaired, clotting mechanism a chance to actually work.
So the miracle was basically stopping harmful medical intervention.
It seems incredibly likely. Whether Rasputin knew this consciously, highly doubtful, or just believed stopping doctors' meddling was spiritually correct, the result was medically beneficial. He effectively healed Alexei by stopping the doctors from poisoning him, pharmacologically speaking.
And Alexandra, convinced it was divine intervention, gave him unprecedented access and influence.
Unfettered access. Nicholas even appointed him lampadnik, the official lamplighter for the icons in the palace. It sounds minor, but it gave him a reason to be there constantly, bypassing the usual court protocols.
And he used this access.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear. He started leveraging his position almost immediately, accepting bribes, trading influence for favors, including sexual favors from women who believed proximity to him brought blessings, or who simply wanted his help petitioning the Tsar or Tsarina.
He even chose his name.
Yes. Around 1906, he formally changed his surname to Rasputin Novi. Rasputin knew. It was a bold statement showing his confidence in his newfound status and the Empress's protection.
And this influence became truly dangerous during World War I.
Catastrophic. The real turning point was 1915 when Nicholas II made the, frankly, disastrous decision to go to the front lines and take personal command of the army.
Leaving Alexandra effectively in charge back in St. Petersburg.
Yes, nominally in charge. But she was isolated, deeply unpopular because of her German birth during a war with Germany, and utterly reliant on Rasputin for advice. Not just spiritual advice anymore, but political advice.
He started influencing government appointments.
Directly, making recommendations for ministers. And these weren't based on competence or experience. They were based on who flattered him, who bribed him, or who Alexandra felt was loyal to Rasputin.
Can you give an example?
The appointment of Boris Sturmer as prime minister in early 1916 is a classic case. Sturmer was widely seen by the Duma, by the political establishment, as completely inept, a reactionary yes-man. Worse, there were strong suspicions he was pro-German. His appointment caused outrage.
So the government became unstable.
Ridiculously unstable. It became known as ministerial leapfrog. Ministers were hired and fired constantly based on Rasputin's whims or Alexander's fluctuating moods. We're talking, multiple prime ministers, war ministers, interior ministers within a single year, complete chaos at the top while Russia was bleeding in the war.
And alongside this political meddling, the personal scandals continued.
They escalated. His drunken behavior, his affairs, they were public knowledge. He had this bizarre idea, or at least claim, that sinning was necessary before repentance, and that physical contact with him, even sexual contact, could purify his followers.
That sounds like a predator's justification.
It certainly does, and the rumors became incredibly lurid. He apparently showed off letters written to him by the Tsarina and her daughters, the Grand Duchesses Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. These were affectionate, deeply spiritual letters, but in the overheated atmosphere, they were twisted.
How so?
They fueled speculation about the nature of his relationship with them. Vile pornographic cartoons started circulating widely, depicting Rasputin in sexual situations with Alexandra, with all 4 of her daughters, and with her close friend and devotee, Anna Virubova.
That must have utterly destroyed the image of the imperial family.
It did irreparable damage. The sanctity, the mystique of the Tsar and his family was dragged through the mud, and the scandals reached right into the palace nursery.
You mentioned the governess incident earlier.
Yes, Sofia Tucheva. She was horrified to find Rasputin had access to the Grand Duchess's rooms when they were in their nightgowns. She complained, demanded he be kept away.
And Alexandra's reaction.
She fired Tucheva immediately. The message was clear. Rasputin's access trumped propriety, even the perceived safety of her own children.
Were there more serious accusations?
There were. Another former governess, Maria Vishnyakova, later accused Rasputin of raping her. When this was brought to Alexandra's attention, her reported response was chilling. Everything Rasputin does is holy.
Wow. That level of delusion or willful blindness? It's staggering.
It is. And you can see why by December 1916, many in the Russian elite, nobles, politicians, even members of the imperial family felt something drastic had to be done.
This leads us to the motive for the assassination. It wasn't just personal disgust.
No, it was seen as a political necessity, a desperate act of patriotism, almost. The conspirators, like Prince Felix Yusupov, incredibly wealthy, married to the Tsar's niece, and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's cousin, saw Rasputin as an existential threat.
Because of his influence over the Tsarina, especially with her being German-born.
Exactly. Russia was losing the war. Casualties were horrific. They blamed Rasputin's disastrous ministerial appointments and Alexandra's perceived pro-German sympathies, which they believed Rasputin encouraged. There were even persistent, terrifying rumors that Rasputin was actively working for a separate peace treaty with Germany.
Treason, essentially.
That's what they feared. They genuinely believed that killing Rasputin was the only way to break his hold, get the Tsar to return from the front, listen to reason, meaning listen to the Duma and the aristocracy, and save Russia from collapse.
So it was a last-ditch effort to save the monarchy from itself.
That was the hope. Remove the evil genius, the dark force, and perhaps the Tsar would wake up, the government could stabilize, and the war effort could be salvaged. And for ordinary Russians, Rasputin had just become this potent symbol of everything wrong and corrupt about the Tsarist court.
Okay, so the stage is set, high stakes, political desperation, lurid scandal. Now let's get to the night itself. December 30th, 1916, old-style calendar. Rasputin is lured to the Moika Palace.
Yusupov's palace in St. Petersburg, and this is where the legend, largely crafted by Yusupov himself in his memoirs published years later, really takes off.
Describe Yusupov's version. How did the initial plan go?
The plan was supposedly poison. Yusupov claimed he had Dr. Lazavert, one of the conspirators, lace some little cakes, petit fours, maybe eclairs, and some glasses of Rasputin's favorite Madeira wine with potassium cyanide.
Enough to kill several men, according to Yusupov.
Right. So Rasputin arrives. Yusupov takes him down to the specially prepared basement room. He offers him the cakes and wine. According to Yusupov, Rasputin starts eating the cakes, drinking the wine, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. Yusupov describes his growing horror and astonishment. Rasputin apparently chats, asks for Yusupov to play the guitar, seems completely unaffected.
He just keeps eating poison cakes.
That's the story. Yusupov claimed he ate several cakes and drank 3 glasses of the poison wine, enough cyanide to fell an ox, supposedly, and he just kept going.
This is the core of the unkillable myth, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It paints Rasputin as having supernatural resistance. Yusupov, panicking because Plan A has utterly failed, decides he has to use a gun.
So he shoots him.
Yes. He excuses himself, goes upstairs, gets a revolver from Dmitry Pavlovich, comes back down, and shoots Rasputin in the chest.
And Rasputin falls. Dead.
Yusupov assumes she's dead. He leaves the body, goes back upstairs to tell the others, Dmitry, Purishkevich, Sikhotin, Dr. Lazavert. There's some relief, maybe some celebration. But then Yusupov gets a nagging feeling, goes back down to check the body.
And this is where it gets really cinematic in his telling.
Right out of a horror movie, Yusupov claims as he leans over the body, Rasputin's eyes snap open. He lets out a roar, leaps up, grabs Yusupov, tearing one of his epaulets off, and starts trying to strangle him.
He attacks Yusupov after being poisoned and shot in the chest.
That's the claim. Yusupov breaks free, terrified, runs upstairs shouting. Rasputin apparently stumbles after him, gets out into the snowy courtyard, still moving.
Who stops in them?
Vladimir Purishkevich, another conspirator, a right-wing politician. Purishkevich runs out, sees Rasputin staggering across the courtyard, and starts firing his own pistol.
How many shots?
Yusupov's account says Purishkevich fired 4 times. The first 2 missed. Then one hit Rasputin in the back, and a final shot hit him in the head as he fell into a snowbank.
Finally dead.
Finally. But the story doesn't end there. Yusupov claims they then savagely beat the body with a truncheon or kosh, then they dragged it inside, bound it tightly with ropes, wrapped it in a heavy curtain or possibly blue cloth.
And disposed of it.
Drove it to the Petrovsky Bridge, and threw it through a hole in the ice into the freezing little Nevka River.
Yusupov's description of this whole event is key to the legend. He uses phrases like,
things like, this devil who was dying of poison, who had a bullet in his heart, must have been raised from the dead by the powers of evil. He frames it as this epic battle against a demonic force, not just a murder.
Why? Why create such an over-the-top story? Surely just saying they killed a traitor would have been enough.
Well, think about when and why Yusupov wrote his detailed memoirs in exile in the late 1920s. Firstly, it sold books. A sensational story of wrestling the devil sells better than a straightforward assassination.
Okay, money. What else?
Reputation. By turning it into the supernatural struggle, Yusupov paints himself not just as a killer, but as a hero, a dragon slayer who tackled an almost immortal evil to save Russia. It justifies the act, makes him seem incredibly brave and determined.
And maybe covers up any incompetence. If the poison didn't work, maybe the initial shooting wasn't clean either.
Exactly. It distracts from the fact that their initial plan, the poisoning, seems to have failed utterly. It turns a potentially messy, panicked murder into a heroic, albeit terrifying, confrontation. The myth served Yusupov's image far better than the likely, simpler truth.
Okay, so that's the legend, born from the killer's own account. Now let's bring in the science. The body was found, right?
Yes. 2 days later, January 1st, 1917, someone spotted a boot, apparently Rasputin's, and some bloodstains on the railing of the Petrovsky Bridge. They searched the river nearby and found the body frozen under the ice about 200 meters downstream.
And an official autopsy was performed.
Yes, a very thorough one, led by Dr. Dmitry Kostotov, who is the city's top forensic pathologist at the time. His report is the key piece of counter-evidence.
So let's go through Yusupov's claims versus Kostotov's findings. First, the poison, the cyanide in the cakes and wine.
Kostotov's finding. Absolutely no trace of poison detected in Rasputin's stomach or tissues. 0.
None at all. That completely undermines the whole miraculous survival part of the story.
Completely. And it fits with other evidence, like Rasputin's daughter Maria always insisting her father avoided sweets because he thought they interfered with his powers. So him wolfing down poison cakes seems unlikely anyway.
What about that claim by Dr. Lazavert, the doctor involved, that he fakes the poison?
That claim surfaced later, that Lazarus confessed he only put in something harmless, maybe having a crisis of conscience. We can't definitively prove that confession, but the autopsy result, no poison found, certainly makes it plausible. Either the poison wasn't administered, or it wasn't cyanide, or Rasputin simply didn't consume it.
Okay, so the poison story is likely false. What about the drowning? Yusupov implied he might still have been alive when thrown in the river.
Kosaratov checked the lungs specifically for this, finding no water in the lungs.
And what does that mean forensically?
It means he was already dead before he entered the water. If you're alive, even barely conscious, when you hit freezing water, there's an involuntary gasp reflex. You inhale water. The absence of water in the lungs is conclusive. He did not drown.
So, reports of him clawing at the ice from underneath, also myth.
Pure myth. He was dead weight when he went into the river.
All right, so if it wasn't poison and it wasn't drowning, what did kill him? The gunshots.
Yes. Koshatov documented the injuries carefully. There was evidence of blunt force trauma, the beating Yusupov described, or maybe damage from grappling hooks used to retrieve the body. It's hard to say if that was pre or post-mortem, but the definitive cause of death was gunshot wounds.
How many?
3. One wound entered the chest, or possibly the back. Descriptions vary slightly. Another was definitely in the back. And the third, the fatal one, was to the head.
A headshot. Where
To
exactly?
the forehead. And this is perhaps the single most crucial forensic finding that contradicts Yusupov's story of Purishkevich shooting a fleeing man across a courtyard.
Why? What was significant about the head wound?
Kosachov noted details consistent with a shot fired at very close range. Probably a contact wound, meaning the muzzle of the gun was pressed right against or extremely close to the forehead when fired.
How could he tell?
Lack of powder tattooing or stippling around the entry wound, possibly a muzzle imprint abrasion on the skin. These are characteristic signs of a close contact shot.
And that doesn't fit Purishkevich shooting from a distance.
Not at all. You don't shoot a fleeing target in the forehead at contact range across a courtyard. That kind of wound suggests something much more deliberate, much closer, an execution.
So, putting the forensic evidence together, what's the most likely sequence of events?
It looks much simpler and much less dramatic than Yusupov's tale. Rasputin was lured to the palace. Maybe there was an attempt to poison him that failed because the poison was fake or he didn't take it. Then, perhaps quite quickly after the failure of Plan A, he was shot.
And the fatal shot was the close-range one to the forehead.
That seems the most logical conclusion from the autopsy. It would have been instantly incapacitating, instantly fatal. No leaping up, no chasing Yusupov, no prolonged struggle in the snow, just execution.
This makes the murder seem less like a desperate struggle and more like a planned hit.
It certainly points that way. And it brings in those other theories, doesn't it? About who might have fired that final professional-looking shot.
You mean the potential British involvement?
Exactly. There have been persistent suggestions, based on some historical analysis and accounts, that the British Secret Intelligence Service, the SIS or MI6, might have been involved.
Why would they be?
The British were desperate to keep Russia in World War I. They saw Rasputin's influence over the Tsarina and the rumors of him pushing for a separate peace with Germany as a major threat to the Allied war effort. Removing him could be seen as strategically vital.
And is there a specific person linked to this theory?
Yes, the name that often comes up is Oswald Rayner, a British SIS officer who was stationed in St. Petersburg at the time and was actually a close friend of Yusupov from their time at Oxford University together.
So the theory is Rayner might have been present at the Moika Palace that night.
And that perhaps he fired the fatal close-range shot to the forehead, ensuring the job was done efficiently after the Russian conspirators had perhaps fumbled the initial attempt with the non-poison.
We can't know for sure who pulled the trigger.
No, it's still debated among historians. But the possibility of foreign intelligence involvement, ensuring Rasputin was eliminated cleanly, adds another layer to the story and fits better with the forensic evidence of an execution-style killing than Yusupov's wild tale does.
So the conspirators kill Rasputin, thinking they're saving Russia. What happened to them?
Well, the murder wasn't exactly kept secret. Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich were quickly identified as the main culprits. But the Tsar didn't put them on trial.
No trial. for murdering his wife's closest confidant.
No. Instead, Nicholas banished them. Yusupov was sent to his remote estate. Dmitry was exiled to the Persian front, which, ironically, probably saved their lives.
Awesome.
Because it got them out of St. Petersburg, or Petrograd as it was then called, before the revolution broke out just a couple of months later in early 1917, they avoided the fate of many other aristocrats and members of the imperial family.
What was the reaction to the murder among the wider public?
It was deeply divided. The elites, the nobility, the politicians in the Duma, they mostly rejoiced. They saw Yusupov and Dmitry as heroes, patriots who had done a necessary, if unpleasant, duty. There was open applause for them.
But not among the ordinary people.
No, especially among the peasantry, Rasputin, despite the scandals, was still seen as one of them, a peasant who had reached the very top. His murder by wealthy aristocrats confirmed their deepest suspicions, that the elite controlled the Tsar and would destroy any commoner who threatened their power.
So instead of restoring faith in the monarchy, the murder actually deepened the divisions.
Absolutely. It highlighted the impotence of the Tsar. He couldn't even properly punish the killers of his friend. It showed the ruthlessness of the aristocracy. It achieved the exact opposite of what the conspirators intended. It didn't stabilize anything, it just poured fuel on the fire.
And the monarchy collapsed soon after.
Incredibly quickly. Rasputin was murdered at the end of December 1916. By March 1917, less than 3 months later, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. The 300-year-old Romanov dynasty was over.
It's hard not to see a connection.
Many historians argue the murder was a catalyst. Alexander Kerensky, who led the provisional government after the Tsar's abdication, reportedly said something like, "Without Rasputin, there would have been no Lenin."
Meaning Rasputin's influence, and then his murder, so thoroughly discredited the Tsarist regime that it paved the way for the Bolshevik Revolution.
That's the argument. He became this ultimate symbol of the corruption, incompetence, and detachment of the old order. His removal didn't cleanse the system. It just exposed the rot for everyone to see, accelerating the inevitable collapse.
Even after his death, the authorities were afraid of his influence. They burned his body.
Yes, that happened in March 1917 after the Tsar abdicated. Kerensky's provisional government ordered Rasputin's body to be exhumed from its initial burial place at Tsarskoye Selo.
Why?
They were afraid the grave would become a shrine, a pilgrimage site for monarchists or superstitious peasants, a rallying point for counter-revolution. So they dug it up, took it out to the countryside, and secretly burned it, scattering the ashes. They wanted to eradicate him completely, physically, and symbolically.
It shows how potent his image remained, even in death.
Absolutely. He was seen as this powerful, destabilizing force right to the very end.
So let's pull this all together. What's the main takeaway when you compare the legend Yusupov created with the forensic facts from Kosatov's autopsy?
The contrast is stark. The legend gives you this unkillable, demonic figure surviving poison, bullets, beatings, only succumbing to drowning after an epic struggle. It's high drama.
But the science?
The science points to something much quicker, much more brutal, and frankly less supernatural. No poison detected. No water in the lungs. Death likely came almost instantly from a single, close-range gunshot wound to the forehead. An execution, not a mystical battle.
So the real drama wasn't Rasputin refusing to die.
No, the real drama, in a way, is the power of the story Yusupov told. That myth became the accepted version for decades. It served Yusupov's purpose, making him a hero and selling books. But by painting Rasputin as this near-invincible evil, the myth ironically just highlighted the weakness and desperation of the regime that couldn't control him while he lived, and whose agents apparently had to resort to such extreme measures.
It didn't save the monarchy. It just underlined why it was doomed.
Precisely. It fed into the narrative of corruption and decay that the revolutionaries exploited so effectively.
Which brings us to one last chilling piece of the puzzle from the sources. That alleged prophecy or letter from Rasputin to the Tsar.
Yes, there's this letter supposedly written by Rasputin shortly before his death, maybe in December 1916. Its authenticity is debated. It could be a later forgery, but its content is haunting.
What did it say?
It warned Nicholas that if he, Rasputin, were killed by boyars, by nobles, by members of the Tsar's own extended circle, then a terrible fate would befall the imperial family.
Specifically?
The letter allegedly predicted that if nobles killed him, then none of your children or relations will remain alive for more than 2 years. They would be killed by the Russian people.
And Rasputin was killed by nobles Yusupov, Grand Duke Dmitry?
Yes. And then, just 19 months later, in July 1918, in a cellar in Yekaterinburg.
Nicholas, Alexandra, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and young Alexei were all executed by the Bolsheviks.
Every single one of them, within the 2-year time frame mentioned in that alleged prophecy.
Whether the letter was genuine prophecy or a chilling coincidence or even a clever fake crafted after the fact, it leaves you thinking.
It really does. Did the aristocracy's attempt to save the monarchy by murdering the peasant mystic actually trigger the curse, sealing the fate of the Romanovs and ensuring the total collapse they were trying to prevent? It's a dark, final irony in a story already full of them.
A truly fascinating and tragic intersection of myth, medicine, and political collapse. Thank you for this deep dive.
Thank you.